It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. A historic high-stakes summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin unfolding today in Finland. The issue of Russian election meddling hanging over the talks, but President Trump pushing back against calls to cancel the face-to-face meeting.
Our relationship has never been worse than it is now. However, that changed as of about 4 hours ago. Nothing would be easier politically than to refuse to meet. As president, I cannot make decisions on foreign policy in a futile effort to appease partisan critics or the media or Democrats who want to do nothing but resist and obstruct. I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics.
President Trump also stunning Washington and the world by dismissing evidence of Russian interference in the 2016 election.
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server. But I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server. What happened to the servers of the Pakistani gentleman that worked on the DNC? Where are those servers? I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates releasing a statement following President Trump's comments saying, in part, quote, "We have been clear in our assessments of Russian meddling in the 2016 election and their ongoing pervasive efforts to undermine our democracy, and we will continue to provide unvarnished and objective intelligence in support of our national security." And President Trump tweeting from Air Force One today, "As I said today and many times before, I have great confidence in my intelligence people. However, I also recognize that in order to build a brighter future, we cannot exclusively focus on the past. As the world's two largest nuclear powers, we must get along. Helsinki 2018 is the hashtag." So we have all the people are here today. We'll just start with you, Greg, and your thoughts.
This presidency is the actual presidency of hope and change. People keep hoping that he will change. This is what you got. And if you keep being surprised by the fact that he's trying to build relationships like a salesman and it gets very disappointing and shocking, you haven't been paying attention, because you have to look at this presidency with fresh eyeballs. He's trying to leave the past behind, and he's trying to build relationships knowing that you cannot trust a lot of these people. He could have talked tougher, but it will never be tough enough for most people because they see him as a salesman. But forget about the talk. Look at the actions. If you want to strangle, Putin's Russia, a public spat isn't going to do it. What you're going to do is you're going to go after their financial pipelines, and you're going to have sanctions, and you're going to arm the Ukraine. So to the idea that if he is Russia's, I don't know, stooge, he might be the worst Russian stooge ever, because he's been tougher on them than Obama has. So the thing is, yes, could have been tougher, but he wouldn't make anybody happy. And this is who he is. He's trying to create relationships. This is no different than North Korea. It may work, it may not work, but you just can't keep pulling your hair out, because you're not going to have any hair left. You're going to look like Brian Stelter.
Kennedy, what do you think about the undermining, though, of the intelligence community, who basically told him, and then they put out a statement saying, we can tell him all of these things, and if he chooses not to believe it or chooses to ignore it, that's up to him.
No, I know the intelligence community has gone through a big perceptual slight lately, and a lot of that has been self-imposed.
However, by the intelligence community?
The intelligence community, meaning the FBI, the CIA, they have all essentially tarnished their own brands because of what has happened at the very top levels. I'm not talking about day-to-day agents who work very hard and truly trying to objectively investigate. But having said that, I still believe them over Vladimir Putin. And I think that's what's most surprising. One thing that I took away from it was the markets were not affected. This is, if it is to be believed, some of the hysteria from the left that this is the most disgraceful performance a president has ever given in public, you would think, if you're talking about two nuclear superpowers and the idea that one president is beholden to a corrupt state, that the markets would show that, in essence, you would have seen them.
The markets have shrugged off everything.
They haven't shrugged off everything. No, they didn't shrug off the tariffs. And so when the trade talk got really tough between China and the EU and Mexico and Canada, that's when you would see, $200 dips per day. But the fact that the market didn't even hiccup, I think, is
maybe
something.
part of the reason for that, Geraldo, is that Russia is pretty much a blip on the radar when it comes to GDP. Texas has a bigger GDP than Russia. Like, we treat them like they're so amazing, and they're really not.
No.
I agree, and it's Russia's 1/10 of the U.S. economy, but I think our colleagues are being too kind on the 45th president, who went off the rails in Helsinki, it seems to me. Totally off the point. What is it? It's like an idiot savant. Hillary Clinton and the email server. I mean, he despises and distrusts Hillary Clinton and the special counsel more than he does Putin and the KGB, or the GRU, you call it now. I hate the fact that the mainstream media set this up for a failure. They were rooting for it to fail because they don't want anything Trump does to succeed. He had it okay. The opening statement, okay. In sync with that tweet that he made from Air Force One. It was okay. But then to go into Hillary and the server and what are you talking about? Please stop it. And I felt very badly for him. It's not a totally unforced error. I feel badly for him. I would totally, if I were him.
Why do you feel badly for him?
I feel badly because he worked hard at it, and he wants the best. I really believe he's sincere.
But what does he want? I guess that's the question. What you understand what he wants out of North Korea. You understand what he wants out of the NATO summit. I guess I don't understand, A, what he wants here, and B, why he's so deferential to a horrible person.
90% of the world's nuclear weapons are held by these two guys. They had the trigger to 90% of the nukes on Earth. I submit that being friends with Putin and having a relationship with Putin, where you can pick up the phone and talk to Putin, is valuable to the United States. And I further submit that Mueller should take Putin up on this deal. He should send his agents to Moscow when they question those dirty dozen. Let them. What are we afraid of? That the Mueller's guys are going to blurt out some state secret that some spook in the corner is going to write down. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's a good idea. It's a good idea. Let them talk to these guys. Let our prosecutors watch the Russia prosecutors ask these dudes questions. How could that hurt?
In exchange, what Putin said in the press conference is he wanted to be able to question Bill Browder, an American citizen, and the lawyer who was defending the Magnitsky Act. That's one reason I could see why not to do it. But let's get Jesse in here.
Here's what I would have said if I was the president. I would have said Russia meddled, and I trust our agency's assessment of it. And this happened under Obama, and no votes were changed. I confronted Vladimir Putin about this. He denied it. It is what it is. We're trying to move past it now. We've put that behind us, and we're going to try to work together towards peace. I know why he didn't do it, because he doesn't want to say anything that's going to undermine his amazing victory over Hillary Clinton. And he can't get past that, and that's very important to him. Also, he can't understand why Russia would want Hillary as president, because he would be so much tougher, and it has been more tough.
Well, Putin said that today
Russia.
in the press conference. He said he did want Trump.
I think he has to say that, because
he said he wanted Trump because he wanted the good relations.
Exactly, but I don't think Trump can understand that, because he believes he's very tough, as Greg mentioned. And then thirdly, I don't think the president trusts our intelligence agencies for a number of reasons. He was very critical during the primary about the WMD fiasco. When all the intelligence agencies said Iraq had him, they didn't, and we lost a lot of blood and treasure in that desert. And now he's got the former DNI director, former CIA director, former FBI director, all kind of scheming against him during his candidacy and then afterwards, throwing spies in there, listening to phone calls, and then actively undermining him during the early stages of his presidency. So that's where he is now.
But those are all his people now.
Exactly. Dan Coats is not.
No, I'm not talking about Dan Coats. I'm talking about Clapper and Brennan.
But he contradicted what Dan Coats said.
Mueller. What's that?
He contradicted what Dan Coats said. Dan Coats.
I know, and he's going to have plenty of chance to clean that up on Hannity and on Tucker. But to your point, he said whatever he said, and he's going to get criticized no matter what. If he goes in and he tries to mend fences with Putin, they're calling him a traitor. If he goes in and starts an arms race with Putin, he's a warmonger.
Exactly.
He's going to get criticized no matter what. And if you think about some of the things that Putin wanted before the summit, he didn't get any of those things. He wanted troops out of Syria. He wanted us to stop sending heavy weapons to Ukraine. He wants the Crimea annexation to be recognized. He wants sanctions lifted. He wants visas unfrozen. He didn't get any of that. The media is acting like Trump gave Alaska back to Russia, and nothing even comes close to that.
We have discussed that. Can I answer the question that you brought up? It's like, what does he want out of this? Yeah. I do think, as President of the United States, he's seeking to reduce the adversarial turf around the globe while substantially increasing our military strength. So basically what he's done, he said, the stick's gotten bigger, here are the carrots. If you want these carrots, you can have them and it'll be a really great experience. But if you don't want them, this is the stick. This is exactly what he did with North Korea. What makes me laugh is that peace seems to be breaking out all over. And a lot of people who normally would be for that are against it. And it's like the champions of dialogue are getting crushed by the dialoguer in chief. He's actually better at this. He's the good cop with his words. He's the bad cop with his deeds. You got sanctions, expulsions, and you got the buildup of this amazing military. You know what? I mean, he does have faults and he does have flaws, but so far it seems to be working.
He's going to be
beyond the words. Look at the deeds, Geraldo.
Listen, I have no beef with the substance of your remarks, but I know the president well enough to know that he's going to be smarting on that flight home. Yeah. He's going to be really angry. He's going to, damn it. He's going to. What was a success in his own mind when he left that podium,
right,
is going to turn to ashes now. Everybody making fun of him. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't take that criticism very.
But what is the alternative? What is the alternative to dialogue when all these people are angry? It's like, would you want us to nuke Moscow? Is that what you want?
More neutrality, but you know this, Dana, from the inside out. Every president wants to thaw Vladimir Putin's icy heart. They want peace in the Middle East, and they want some resolution in North Korea. This president has tried to do all three in his first year.
Part of it,
I don't know if that's possible with Putin.
But Putin, he's just a complete and total liar, and he wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union, and he is going to be. He's been in power a lot longer than President Trump will be. If Trump gets reelected and he's there 8 years, President Putin will still be there years later. So this is really
18 years so far.
It's a blip on the radar for President Putin, and I don't think that Putin is not going to change, and he has no incentive to.
But you can compete. You can have those competing thoughts in your head at the same time. You don't need to have one thought like Putin cannot be trusted. That's one thought. The other one is we have to deal with him. That's another thought. You can have both those thoughts in your head. The problem is the media makes it, though, if you meet with Putin, clearly you trust him. Or you're in bed with him.
I think
they're calling him treasonous. They're calling him treasonous.
So
I mean, that's what Brennan did. I think Brennan's hyperbole is a little beyond the scope of acceptability.
Me too.
All right, President Trump facing heavy criticism over his comments during the summit with Putin. We'll break it down for you next.
We'll break it down.
And byways that'll take her anywhere but my way. There's so many ways she could say goodbye.
Your turn. And now you fellas leave your girl with her friends. 'Cause it's 11:30 and the club is jumping.
Blowback coming from both sides of the political aisle after President Trump's news conference with Vladimir Putin.
For the President of the United States to side with President Putin against American law enforcement, American defense officials, American intelligence agencies is thoughtless, it's dangerous, it's weak.
What the President said today is not accurate. The intelligence community has assembled probably an unparalleled amount of evidence in regards to the Russian, not just efforts to interfere in 2016, but ongoing efforts to interfere in American society.
The media also joining in on the criticism of the president.
You have been watching perhaps one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president.
This, what many would say, disgraceful performance with Vladimir Putin.
They came across as playmates on a soccer field more than they did international rivals.
Mr. Putin now is the master puppeteer of Donald Trump.
You should call this the Surrender Summit.
Wow. All right, Greg, I know we've talked about this. Where were all these left-wingers during the Cold War when we needed them?
When the USSR was 8 times the size of Russia, and they actually were about world expansion.
Right.
And all they did was ridicule Republicans and conservatives for being anti-communist. They were anti-communist for, 3 or 4 decades. They were drooling bedfellows of all the romantic communists, whether it was anybody in South America or, what's his name, Castro. R.I.P. Anybody who was a communist, a revolutionary, Che Guevara was on a T-shirt. Now, they're back. Again, I use the metaphor. They're like your friend who offers to help you move to your apartment, but they show up after everything's been moved.
Great timing by the Democrats.
Yes.
We brought this up just during the last discussion a little bit. I think every president, when they first get into the office, Obama did it. I remember his first meeting with Putin. He sat there and listened to Putin lecture him for 1 hour straight about the history of American-Russian relations. Hillary had the reset. George Bush said, I looked into his soul. I think American presidents always come in doing this, and then always at the end of the terms, it's frozen again.
Well, and especially so in 2001, when President Bush first takes office and he has the first meeting with Putin, Putin comes to the White House. They have the meeting in the Oval Office. That was before Putin decided to do things like invade Georgia. And then I remember at that 2008 Olympics when they had the last meeting, the last time they ever spoke, it was when Vladimir Putin said, well, Saakashvili's hot-blooded and I'm hot-blooded too. And the president said, no, you're cold-blooded. And that's the last time he ever spoke. Then Obama comes in and then they have the reset. But don't forget, it was Romney in the debates talking about Russia, and he was also ridiculed, but not just by the media, but by Democrats who thought that this was so foolhardy. I do, though, think about if the shoe were on the other foot. If Trump had just lost the election and we found out that Putin was trying to help Hillary and he had gotten into the RNC, and this conversation might be very different. And but I feel like the frustration for me, but for him today, was this missed opportunity to say, this was an attack on all of us and we know what you're doing and you're not going to get away with it again.
Because
that would have been enough.
There was an attempt for the Russians to hack the RNC servers. They went after both sides. I guess it was a little easier to go after the DNC. Yes, that is true. There was an attack on those RNC servers, but they weren't able to penetrate.
If you totally disregard everything that the intelligence communities have said, that all of the indictments point to the push to get to the DNC.
Yeah, I agree, and he should have been a little stronger about that today.
Okay, so where do we go now? We have sanctions. The president trying to normalize relations. It's one thing to want to put the past in the past, but that behavior is still very much manifesting itself in 2018, and it will in 2020 unless we do something. So what do we do? What kind of an investment are we talking about in cybersecurity? What sort of retribution will there be if Russia continues to do this? Russia said the same thing about their systemic government-run doping program. They said it didn't exist. It was a few individuals, and that was proven to be completely false. It's the same thing here. They're not trustworthy. But what do we do on our side? Because I think Dana hit on something really important here. If Hillary had won, with or without Russian meddling, which wasn't necessarily interference, and there are 3 different things here: interference, meddling, and collusion. And we have to be able to take those 3 things separately. I think Hillary Clinton would have gone over and she would have had the exact same kind of meeting.
Well,
Absolutely.
Imagine if Barack Obama had done that press conference that you saw today. There would have been absolutely, there would have been calls for him to be impeached. It would have been absolute
the
craziness.
apology tour.
It would have been.
It was an apology tour. Absolutely.
I just brief history stuff. I covered Latin America for ABC News. I was Allende, elected official. We totally mucked around with that election. All those Central American nations, we mucked around with all of their elections. The United States does not have clean hands when it comes to mucking around in other people's elections, and I think for us to be on the high horse is pretty hypocritical. The other point is, because we have such short-term memories, we forget the context of Ukraine. Up until 4 years ago, Ukraine was a Russian puppet. It was a Russian puppet. It was totally, not only did they have the fleet in Crimea, but the president of Ukraine was a pro-Putin guy. We helped
engineer. Who was working with Paul Manafort.
We're working with Paul Manafort. It's another story. We helped engineer the coup that overthrew the elected president of Ukraine, who was pro-Russian. That's when Putin says, my God, they took Ukraine from me. What am I going to do? My fleet is threatened now in Crimea, and everybody there speaks Russian anyway. Damn it, I'm going to take Crimea. Eastern Ukraine, they all speak Russian there. I don't have the whole country anymore, but I'm going to take this little slice. I mean, we have to see where we were compared to where we were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Ukraine was totally commie. totally, I don't mean, you know what I mean, totally pro-Russian, into the Russian camp. Now Ukraine they wanted to make a member of NATO, and Putin's looking, and his former ally is now on his border, singing Kumbaya and the Star-Spangled Banner.
All right, well, I do think this is different, though, than Obama's apology tour. I don't see this as an apology. I see this as a custom that when you go somewhere, and you saw it with North Korea, and you're seeing it with Putin, you will probably see it with Iran, which is the custom of allowing your adversary to save face in public while you exercise something completely different in private. We don't know what's going on privately, but we do know what's happening. There's a lot being done about that pipeline that Trump brought up in another place. There's going to be, that's short of an actual shooting war. Going after that pipeline is a pretty big deal.
Well, and now the president and Vladimir Putin can answer for what happened in that private sit-down, which is really important. We don't know the details of that, but that is
until it leaks, because you know it probably will. All right, next on the 5, Greg takes on anti-Trump protests over in Europe.
All right, here's a reaction in London to Donald Trump's recent visit. I could watch that forever. Those are some seriously fit protesters. They couldn't punch their way through a cat's sneeze. So here's more. No wonder they're worried about America leaving NATO. Now, you can learn a lot from a protest. First, if there's a violent revolution from the left, we can relax. I have seen fitter corpses. Second, you could look it up, but I doubt you saw this kind of rage over the organized child sex abuse in Rotherham or recent terror attacks in England. Third, you have to ask why they care so much about us and about our immigration concerns. It's because these protesters are leftists first, countrymen second. As with all socialists, the cause always outranks any patriotism. But what of the giant Trump balloon? The media made it seem so huge, but I think I won something like that at a county fair. 20,000 pounds. That's what it costs for these idiots to feel good about themselves. Meth is cheaper and I hear more effective. That's the problem with trying to inflate your importance without actually being important at all. You end up looking small, stupid, weak. Looked like a close match. So Trump landed on that island and became the only thing anybody talked about. He made Sacha Baron Cohen look like Mr. Rogers. Did you even realize Wimbledon was won? And then he left. Yep, he came out of the sky, scared the natives, met the Queen. Now he's gone. And they're all saying, did you see that? In other words, Trump went to Britain, but all you got was that lousy balloon. So, Geraldo, the blimp wasn't for Trump. It was for people who hate Trump. It was their therapy pet.
That looked like the follow-up to Revenge of the Nerds, didn't it? Someone should tell me he hits like a girl, but you can't say that anymore.
No, you can't.
No, you can't say that.
There are some girls who can hit. Have you watched the MMA recently?
My God, yes. The thing about Trump's unpopularity, it is visceral.
Yes.
And you see it in our country most vividly. It's not... It's even worse than Nixon. It really is. And, I'm probably the only one, definitely the only one old enough to know that firsthand. But there's a kind of metastasized hatred that is explosive in many ways. And I think the normally passive, polite Brits showed the same kind of reaction that half the American electorate feels. So he just generates really caustic response.
But, I notice, Dana, it's often very childish, and that's okay. You can protest but I've talked to you this about when I lived in London during Katrina, people in pubs would come in and just rail again. I mean, they were vicious about Bush. They hated Bush. They hate everybody.
That's on the right.
That's on the right.
And I've never understood why they care so much about who our leader is anyway, because we don't care about them. It might be like some deep-seated thing of like we beat them so many years ago.
Yeah.
But also the other thing is, whoever the president of the United States is, he is the leader of the free world, and there is power in that. And they have this former glory, right? They used to. The sun never set on the British Empire, but it sets pretty early now.
Now the balloon blocks the sun, Jesse.
And the balloon people might be on Waters World this weekend.
Oh,
so
really?
Stay tuned.
Really?
We're making a very hard effort to book them. This brings up a few questions for me. One, if Germany starts bombing London again and Trump has to swoop in and save them for the second time, I think he'll be pretty popular. Second of all, Trump gives weaklings like this guy a purpose in life. Gets them off their couch, gives them some exercise, some sunlight on their face. They get to be around people with common interests, and I think that's a good and healthy thing. Also, I don't want an American president to be popular in Europe. I'm suspicious of that. Obama was popular because he went over there and he kissed their you-know-what, and he acceded to all of their wishes, signed all their little treaties, and that's okay. But Trump wants to represent Michigan, not Britain, and that's fine.
Kennedy, it wasn't like the protest was about war, because it's like, again, Trump is the opposite of a warmonger.
Right.
And yet, so what are they mad about? They're just mad about the man.
They are mad about the man.
Yeah.
They're mad about him and his temperament and his personality. But with a lot of people in this country, it's funny because when you talk to independent voters and those who maybe gave him a grudge vote, they're getting used to him. And that's what a lot of people say. And that's why, the loudest reaction comes from progressive, because that's the shrinking outrage. And the rest of the world will get used to him almost when it's too late. It's going to be in the 7th year of his presidency when they realize they're going to miss him when we have another bland, vanilla, monotonous president who is long-winded and very boring in press conferences.
Are you talking about Mike Pence?
I'm so glad you said that, because when I saw those people punching the president dummy and the guy with tiny arms knocked him over, I thought, oh, okay, he's not president anymore. So what do you want? President Pence?
Yes,
Is that the ultimate goal? Because that is actually the opposite of what most people want.
Pence is way more conservative than Trump. That's for sure. All right.
Way less pragmatic.
Yes. Tucker Carlson, you know him. He sat down with President Trump right after the summit with Putin. He's here next to tell us how the president is reacting. Look at him. Hi, Tucker. Hey.
Well, did you see the old man outside the Siemens mission?
President Trump and Vladimir Putin meeting face-to-face, as you know, today in Finland. Tucker Carlson sat down with the president right after that extraordinary address to the world, and Tucker joins us right now from Helsinki. So did the president, welcome Tucker, did the president hear the reaction to his presentation prior to boarding Air Force One, prior to your interview, I guess?
Well, I spoke to him almost directly after the press conference he gave, and I was getting updates on the reaction from the U.S. and read some of them to him. He didn't seem moved by them at all. He dismissed them. I think he knows what he thinks on the Russia question. I guess that was obvious from the press conference, whether you agree with it or not. He thinks that Russia is not the primary threat to the United States. China is. And that it's absurd to pass up a chance to become closer to a government that might help the United States in some way. That's the position he stated actually for a couple of years now. But he seemed more hardened in it, I thought, than he had been in the past. So, no, he did not seem especially disturbed by the reaction.
Did he, or did you ask him whether the kind of equivocal answer that Putin gave when asked the question, do you have any dirt on President Trump? Did President Trump say, I wish he had been more definitive, or did that come up at all, Tuck?
It didn't. I mean, the question was obviously stupid, and so I didn't consider responding to, do you have dirt on President Trump? To which Putin's supposed to say, actually, it's funny, I do, in fact. We call it a dossier. I mean, that was just such a dumb, do you know what I mean? It was the kind of thing, I don't think all questions reporters ask are dumb. Some of them are smart. But that was in the dumb category. That was in the sort of discredit the press category. I mean, like, why would you ask a question like that? You're not going to get a real answer.
Well, I think you could have gotten a more convincing denial than we got from the Russian president. Kennedy?
What is it?
Tucker?
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
It's a big day.
Hey, Kennedy.
Hi, good to talk to you. So much emotion, so much reaction. What was the very best question you asked the president?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if any of my questions are particularly great. I'm interested in the NATO question, though. I mean, all the attention's been on how much are our allies paying into NATO, and I think it's worth asking, why do we have NATO, actually? NATO was,
That's a
not
great
that I'm
question. Did you ask
anti-NATO,
him that?
but I did. That was one of my first questions. NATO was created mostly to keep the Soviets, the Russians, from invading Western Europe. Nobody thinks that's a possibility now. And yet we're stuck with this very expensive infrastructure and Article 5, which is a security guarantee. If Montenegro, which is a new member of NATO, is attacked, my son is obligated, America is obligated to go defend Montenegro. Why is that? Maybe that's a great idea, but tell me why that's a great idea. How is that in America's interest to extend a security guarantee to Albania? I mean, is it? If so, tell me how. And I asked the president that, and he said, in effect, good question. I've raised that, but didn't go further. But I think it's worth debating. I mean, everyone should be debating that question, I think.
Hey, Tucker, it's Jesse here. Quick question. I know you interviewed the president early on in his term, I think a month or two in, and now you've interviewed him again. Did you notice a change at all in him, and what was his demeanor like when you interviewed him this time? Was he in good spirits? Was he tired? Was he, how did he seem to you?
It's funny. I was actually texting my brother that exact thing in the commercial break. I've thought about it all day. He did seem different. I've talked to him in the interim as well. He seemed less concerned with what his critics say. He seemed more certain of what he thinks. He seemed funnier. He seemed less sort of aligned with conventional views in Washington, for good or bad. I mean, obviously, most of the foreign policy establishment in Washington, and that includes Republicans, I mean, they're what we used to call neocons. I mean, they have a very specific view of the world, and he used to kind of pay some lip service to that, and he doesn't anymore at all. And, I mean, again, you may think that's terrible, you may think it's great, but he is much more defined, my read was, in what he believes than he was a year ago.
Wow, because he seemed pretty certain about his belief system about a year and a half ago. Can't imagine him being more certain of anything.
Yeah, well, he seemed to be.
Want me to go next? Hi, Tucker. I guess I would ask you what the follow-up is from this. So there are a lot of things that Putin was wanting to get. I think like a request to lift sanctions. Do you think that will happen?
I think it would be, I mean, if you actually, I don't know, of course, is the short answer. The real question is, what do you do about Syria? I mean, that is, that's an open wound in the middle of Levant. The refugee crisis from there has transformed Europe. It's destabilized the countries around it, particularly Jordan. I mean, it's a huge deal. And Russia is a key player there. And this White House has been basically at war with the Assad regime. Will that continue? That's the real question. So Trump, as much as he's made a lot of friendly noises about Russia, has been killing Russians, this administration, our military, killing Russian citizens in Syria. Again, maybe you think that's great, maybe you think it's bad, but it's very different from the rhetoric. Will that change? I mean, that's what I'm interested in seeing.
Greg?
Yes, it's very hard, at least for me, Tucker, to take the media response to this seriously, since it's always been at an incredible high pitch that I for some reason, maybe I don't hear it anymore. But I'm wondering if this is because the media is blaming Putin for Hillary's loss, and they're constantly demanding their pound of flesh, and nothing will ever be enough.
I mean, I'm not a shrink, so I don't fully understand it. I don't think Russia is our close friend or anything like that. I think, of course, they try to interfere in our affairs. They have for a long time. Many countries do, some more successfully than Russia, like Mexico, which is routinely interfering in our elections by packing our electorate. So those are all concerns. I honestly don't understand why we need to believe that Russia is the sort of primary issue of American political life. That seems kind of nuts to me. Maybe you disagree with Trump, which is totally fine. But the idea that where you are on Russia is the defining question, like, that's kind of demented, actually. Because it's like number 115 on the list of real concerns, at least in my mind. Maybe I'm the demented one, but that's my opinion.
Tucker, have you eaten any reindeer?
I had a pizza with crickets on it. Deep fried crickets, which were delicious. I ate all kinds of weird fish parts. This is a great country, and if you can get to Finland, don't, because overpopulation will destroy it. But some people should.
Tucker, I gotta go, dude. But you're going to preview your interview tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Then the extended sit down with the president airs tomorrow on your show, Tucker Carlson Tonight.
President Trump teases that, Geraldo. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. President Trump raking in the cash for his 2020 re-election efforts while blasting his potential challengers. We'll tell you what he is saying about the big money roll-in next.
you ready for the 2020 presidential campaign? President Trump sure is. He's already raking in cash for his re-election efforts. The New York Times reporting he has raised more than $88 million over the last year and a half, which gives him a leg up on the competition. Here are his thoughts on the prospective Democratic field.
Do you see any Democrat who can possibly...
No, I don't see anybody. I know them all. I don't see anybody. I know many of them. I've seen them. I've dealt with them. And so far, they do not have the right candidate.
Dana, if they find the right candidate, will Democrats be able to kickstart that election machine?
It's hard to imagine it now because all the economic indicators are so good, and the president is raking in a ton of money, and I'm not at all surprised by that because I think he has like a 90% approval rating amongst Republicans in the country, and they're like, well, let's keep this going for as long as we possibly can. That said, Democrats are super good. I keep reminding people this. They're very, very good at registering new voters, and it swamps Republicans if Republicans don't focus on it. It's something that Republicans kind of typically just expect people to go out and vote because it's their civic duty. Democrats really get out there and have the infrastructure to sign up new voters. So it's going to be a major race. But right now,
they're shaking the tree, hoping that the peaches.
They're going to have like the 17 candidates that the Republicans had in 2015 and 16. The Democrats will have in 19 and 20.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of Democrats fear. They don't want that. So what is the president capitalizing on with the fundraising push in his various PACs?
Small donors. He's getting a lot of money from small donors, and that surprises people because everybody thinks the Republican Party is the party of, the rich, elite Wall Street people. But of the names that have been floated, Booker, I think he's a lightweight. Warren, this Indian controversy, is still going to dog her, and I don't think she's going to play nationally. Harris, I think she's really a pretty qualified candidate. She's quality, not qualified. But my problem with her is she's not uplifting the way Obama was uplifting. I don't think she strikes the right tone there. And Biden, I just think, is an old white guy who's a little bit of a has-been and who's never really campaigned effectively or has any natural constituency.
All right, so you've got Biden and Sanders. It almost seem like they're the ones fighting for the top of the ticket. Those wonderful, fresh, young voices the Democrats have been promising.
Yeah, combined age 6,000. Do you know, though, look, you got to about the money thing, money wasn't the reason why Trump won in 2016, right? He didn't spend nearly as much money as Hillary. The other thing is one of the reasons why he won is the contrast theory. If you have 17 people up there, 17 types of soft pillows, the hard pillow will actually sell better because it's different. So you had 17 soft pillows and one hard pillow. It's a study done by
My Pillow.
My Pillow. But it's an actual study.
Was Donald the hard pillow or was Hillary the hard pillow?
I think that she was the hard pill. But the thing is, this is going to happen with the Democrats. It's going to be a contrast theory. There's going to be 17, and you're going to get a Trump-like figure.
So is that what they're going to do? Is it going to be a transformational figure or someone who can just out-bully Trump?
I think it has to be someone with great charisma and someone who can go toe-to-toe with him. I mean, the way the pillow metaphors aside, I think Trump was so much more charismatic than the other.
America, are you ready for the 2020 presidential campaign? President Trump sure is. He's already raking in cash for his re-election efforts. The New York Times reporting he has raised more than $88 million over the last year and a half, which gives him a leg up on the competition. Here are his thoughts on the prospective Democratic field.
Do you see any Democrat who can possibly...
No, I don't see anybody. I know them all. I don't see anybody. I know many of them. I've seen them. I've dealt with them. And so far, they do not have the right candidate.
Dana, if they find the right candidate, will Democrats be able to kickstart that election machine?
It's hard to imagine it now because all the economic indicators are so good, and the president is raking in a ton of money, and I'm not at all surprised by that because I think he has like a 90% approval rating amongst Republicans in the country, and they're like, well, let's keep this going for as long as we possibly can. That said, Democrats are super good. I keep reminding people this. They're very, very good at registering new voters, and it swamps Republicans if Republicans don't focus on it. It's something that Republicans kind of typically just expect people to go out and vote because it's their civic duty. Democrats really get out there and have the infrastructure to sign up new voters. So it's going to be a major race. But right now,
they're shaking the tree, hoping that the peaches.
They're going to have like the 17 candidates that the Republicans had in 2015 and 16. The Democrats will have in 19 and 20.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of Democrats fear. They don't want that. So what is the president capitalizing on with the fundraising push in his various PACs?
Small donors. He's getting a lot of money from small donors, and that surprises people because everybody thinks the Republican Party is the party of, you know, the rich, elite Wall Street people. But of the names that have been floated, Booker, I think he's a lightweight. Warren, this Indian controversy, is still going to dog her, and I don't think she's going to play nationally. Harris, I think she's really a pretty qualified candidate. She's quality, I mean, not qualified. But my problem with her is she's not uplifting the way Obama was uplifting. I don't think she strikes the right tone there. And Biden, I just think, is an old white guy who's a little bit of a has-been and who's never really campaigned effectively or has any natural constituency.
All right, so you've got Biden and Sanders. It almost seem like they're the ones fighting for the top of the ticket. Those wonderful, fresh, young voices the Democrats have been promising.
Yeah, combined age 6,000. Do you know, though, look, you got to about the money thing, money wasn't the reason why Trump won in 2016, right? He didn't spend nearly as much money as Hillary. The other thing is one of the reasons why he won is the contrast theory. If you have 17 people up there, 17 types of soft pillows, the hard pillow will actually sell better because it's different. So you had 17 soft pillows and one hard pillow. It's a study done by
My Pillow.
My Pillow. But it's an actual study.
Was Donald the hard pillow or was Hillary the hard pillow?
I think that she was the hard pill. But the thing is, this is going to happen with the Democrats. It's going to be a contrast theory. There's going to be 17, and you're going to get a Trump-like figure.
So is that what they're going to do? Is it going to be a transformational figure or someone who can just out-bully Trump?
I think it has to be someone with great charisma and someone who can go toe-to-toe with him. I mean, the way the pillow metaphors aside, I think